The hiss of butter on cast iron filled the kitchen like music. It was 10:45 a.m. at Le Nordais, one of the most talked-about restaurants in the city, and the kitchen was already alive. Flames danced under steel pans, knives tapped a steady rhythm on chopping boards, and the smell of thyme, garlic, and ambition hung thick in the air. And at the center of it all was Raymond Ellis. He didn't bark orders. He didn't need to. His presence alone made things move. Dressed in a well-worn apron and plain black chef's coat, Raymond was calm and focused, always a few steps ahead. He tasted sauces without measuring, adjusted heat by instinct, folded in flavors the way a painter touches canvas. He'd been at Le Nordais since it opened 12 years ago, before the marble countertops, the awards, the wine wall, or the influencer reviews. Before the place was elevated, back when it was just food. The line cooks watched him with quiet respect. "Chef Ray, how you get the carrots that sweet without sugar?" one asked. Raymond stirred a pot without looking up. "Leave 'em be. The flavor'll come if you don't rush it." That was his style, measured, patient, exacting. He never needed the spotlight, but that didn't mean he hadn't earned it. At noon, the kitchen door swung open, and in walked Nina, the manager, clipboard in hand, smile way too tight. "Quick meeting, everyone. Big announcement." The staff gathered around the prep table, wiping their hands. "As y'all know, next week we have a major guest coming in. Velma Crane, food critic, blogger, also happens to sit on the Michelin panel for next season." Eyes widened. Nina continued. "So, to give Le Nordais the best possible shot at a star, we're bringing in a new face, a fresh touch to the kitchen." That's when he walked in. Luca Vance, late 30s, designer sneakers, tattooed arms, hair styled like he never cooked a day in his life. But somehow, he did. Nina beamed. "Meet our new head chef." There was a pause in the room, 1 second too long. Raymond didn't flinch, didn't say a word. He just nodded once, wiped his hands, and quietly went back to his station. In the corner, someone whispered, "Wait, what about Ray?" But no one answered. On the wall behind Nina, framed in gold, were photos of the founding team. There were 6 smiling faces in those photos. Raymond's wasn't one of them. By Wednesday, the kitchen felt different. Luca Vance had made himself at home fast. Too fast. He strutted through the line like a man who'd been crowned, not hired. He touched sauces that weren't his, offered critiques nobody asked for, and corrected techniques he clearly didn't understand. But the real shift came when he began naming dishes. "This one," he said, pointing to the smoked duck with okra glaze, "we'll call it Vance's Southern Fusion. It'll be my signature for the critic." Raymond paused, mid-chop. That dish, his dish, had been on the menu since year 3. He'd written the first version in a notebook with his wife's initials in the margins. He didn't say anything, just lowered his gaze and kept slicing. 2 nights later, Raymond walked into the prep room and found Andre, the young sous chef, hovering over a stack of pages from his personal recipe book. Raymond's notebook, worn leather, corners frayed, pages yellowed with time, was open, its secrets exposed. Andre jumped. "Chef, I didn't mean to..." Chef Luca said he wanted us to modernize a few things, and I thought... Raymond held up his hand. "It's all right, son. Just don't leave that open again." He closed the book gently, almost like tucking in a child for the night. The next morning, Nini burst into the kitchen holding a glossy magazine spread. "We're in City Eats Monthly. Look." On the cover was Luca, holding a perfectly plated version of the duck dish, smiling like he'd invented air. "Chef Luca's Southern Twist shakes up fine dining," the headline read. Raymond stood at the back of the kitchen, expression unreadable. The younger cooks looked at him, unsure. Some knew the truth. Others were just starting to, but no one said a word. Raymond didn't demand credit. He never had. He believed the work spoke for itself. But now, Someone else was speaking over it. That night, he sat alone at the bar after closing, sipping a small glass of bourbon. The restaurant was quiet. Empty tables, wiped clean. The only light came from the open kitchen behind him. He stared at his reflection in the glass. His hands, weathered from decades of chopping, stirring, building. Hands that had fed governors, musicians, and single mothers on food stamps. Hands that had created flavors from nothing but scraps. Now, those same hands were invisible. He didn't want fame, but he didn't deserve to be erased, and something inside him, something long buried, began to stir. It was a Thursday evening when Velma Crane walked in, alone, wrapped in a deep blue shawl, with a notebook tucked under her arm and an expression that had sunk a dozen restaurants before dessert. The maître d' recognized her instantly, and the hush swept through the dining room like a cold draft. Luca appeared moments later, buttoning his white coat, a forced grin stretched across his face. "Chef Crane, welcome. We're honored." She barely nodded. No need for fanfare. Let the food do the talking. In the kitchen, nerves crackled like oil on the stove. Luca barked orders, rearranged plates, and sprinkled microgreens like a magician throwing glitter. But for all the noise, the real work, the subtle flavors, the seasoning, the pacing, was being done by Raymond, as always. Raymond worked quietly at Station 3. He hadn't even known she was coming. He was prepping the duck, his duck, just like he had for over a decade. Slow smoked, pan seared, finished in the oven with a honey glaze and an okra reduction poured low and slow from a ladle worn thin by years of repetition. When the dish left the kitchen, he didn't look up. He didn't need to. At her table, Velma took one bite and paused, then another. Then she set her fork down and stared straight ahead, her brow furrowed, not with disappointment, but memory. She pulled out her notebook and scribbled something fast, lips pressed tight. After a few minutes, she motioned for the manager. "Tell Chef Vance I'd like a word." In the kitchen, Luca straightened his jacket like a man stepping onto a stage. He strutted out to her table, expecting praise. Instead, he was met with a long, unblinking stare. "You say this is your dish?" Velma asked calmly. "Yes, inspired by Southern roots, elevated through—" "Funny," she cut in, "because I had this exact dish before. Same glaze, same smoke, same soul. That was 27 years ago, in a little place outside Jackson, Mississippi." Luca's smile wavered. Maybe I absorbed the inspiration. You know, food memory." Velma closed her notebook slowly. "Number. That dish belonged to a man named Raymond Ellis, and I can smell his fingerprint on every bite of this plate." She stood. "Tell me, is he still in your kitchen?" Luca didn't answer, but everyone else in the room had heard enough. That night, Raymond was wiping down his station when Amina, one of the waitresses, rushed in holding her phone. "Chef Ray, she posted already." Raymond raised a brow. "Posted what?" She handed him the phone. There it was, an Instagram post from @Velma Crane Critiques. The dish was brilliant, but the name on the jacket wasn't the one who made it so. Some chefs build careers, others build legacies in silence. Below it, a photo, the duck dish, and a blurry background shot of Raymond working in the kitchen. The story was out. The curtain had torn. And Raymond? He wasn't just the shadow anymore. He was the fire. The next morning, the phones at Le Nordais rang nonstop. Emails flooded in. Food blogs reposted Velma Crane's write-up with headlines like, "Chef plagiarizes mentor's dish, gets exposed by a legend. The man behind the meal, who is Raymond Ellis?" In the kitchen, the mood had shifted entirely. Where once there had been quiet tension, now there was open respect and whispered apologies. The young line cooks, who had once looked to Luca, were now glancing toward Raymond with wide eyes, like they were seeing him for the first time. And Luca? He didn't show up. By noon, news broke that Lenorda's investors had pulled his contract. Just like that, the flashy head chef who'd claimed the glory was gone, evaporated like steam. That afternoon, Raymond was called into the office. Nina looked exhausted, her once proud energy now wilted. "Raymond, I owe you an apology." He said nothing, just folded his hands in his lap. "The owners want to offer you the head chef position, publicly, officially. They're prepared to raise your salary, give you full creative control." Raymond raised a hand gently. "I appreciate it, but no." Nina blinked. "No?" Raymond stood, slow and steady, and for the first time in a long time, he looked completely at peace. "You needed me when it was convenient. You silenced me when it mattered. A seat at the table ain't worth much if they only pull out the chair when they're losing money." He nodded, turned, and left the office, with nothing but his apron and his notebook in hand. Weeks passed, and then one day, the city woke up to a new name on the corner of Walnut and 10th. A cozy, modern, southern restaurant. Nothing flashy. Brick and wood, a chalkboard menu, the smell of smoked okra and rosemary grits drifting out onto the sidewalk. The name above the door read, Ellis and Company. Real food, real roots inside. Raymond moved like always, calm, deliberate, hands steady. He wasn't chasing stars anymore. He was feeding people. Amina ran the front. Andre, the young sous chef who once copied his recipes, now stood beside him as his right hand. And on the wall, above the kitchen window, was a single frame. Inside it, a torn photo from Lenorda's opening year, one that someone had once tried to leave him out of. And beside it, in gold lettering, "Don't wait for a seat at their table. Build your own." Some people wait a lifetime for recognition. Others learn that silence, in the face of injustice, is the loudest betrayal of all. Raymond Ellis didn't raise his voice. He raised kitchens. He raised standards. He raised others. And when the world finally turned to see him, he had already built a place of his own. If this story moved you, help it move someone else. Like, share, and subscribe to support more stories that deserve a voice, because the table means nothing without the people who built it.